Please subscribe and share for more story. The wineglass slipped from Marissa Hale's fingers the moment her mother collapsed. Crystal shattered across the tiled floor, but the sound barely registered over the sudden panic that filled the room. Guests screamed. Chairs scraped back. Her mother, Helen Brooks, lay rigid on the floor, her body jerking violently, foam gathering at her lips. Across the room, Evelyn Carter stood frozen, one hand gripping the back of a chair. At 68, Evelyn had seen enough in life to recognize disaster when it announced itself. Her son Daniel shouted for someone to call an ambulance, his voice cracking. But beneath the chaos, a single, chilling thought cut through Evelyn's mind with terrifying clarity. That glass wasn't meant for Helen. Evelyn lowered herself slowly beside the convulsing woman, her face composed, her pulse steady. Panic was useful for crowds, not for survival. As sirens wailed faintly in the distance, Evelyn already knew this night had crossed a line no apology could ever erase. If anyone wondered how a quiet retirement celebration could turn into a medical emergency, the answer lay hours earlier. Evelyn Carter was not a woman unfamiliar with risk. She had spent 4 decades building a cybersecurity consultancy from her late husband's basement, navigating hostile boardrooms and ruthless investors. That morning, she had finalized the sale of her firm for $36 million. Daniel, now 39, had insisted on hosting a celebration at her Chicago townhouse. "You deserve this, Mom," he had said, smiling too quickly. "Let Marissa handle everything." Evelyn had agreed, though experience had taught her that generosity often came with strings. At her age, people didn't offer help unless they expected something in return. Still, she had pushed the unease aside. It was supposed to be a celebration, a closing chapter. Instead, it became the opening scene of something far darker. The first warning sign should have been Marissa herself. She had never shown interest in hosting anything more complicated than brunch, yet that afternoon she moved through the house like a woman on a mission. Flowers were rearranged repeatedly, silverware polished twice. Evelyn watched quietly from her study as Marissa hovered near the kitchen counter, checking her phone, glancing at the door. "You've outdone yourself," Evelyn said casually at one point. Marissa's smile was tight. "I just want everything perfect," she replied. Too perfect. Guests arrived in waves, former colleagues, neighbors, distant relatives, nearly 30 people in all. A bartender poured champagne. Laughter filled the air. And still, Marissa kept returning to her purse, fingers brushing its clasp as though reassuring herself something was still there. Evelyn was speaking with her former operations director when she saw it. Marissa stood alone near the drink table, her back half-turned. She glanced around, then reached into her designer clutch and withdrew a tiny glass vial. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't blink. She watched as Marissa tipped the vial, emptying its contents into a single champagne flute, the one etched with a small bird design Evelyn always favored. A younger woman might have screamed. A reckless one might have intervened. Evelyn did neither. Experience had taught her that predators exposed themselves best when they believed the trap was already sprung. She kept nodding as her colleagues spoke about market volatility, while Marissa lifted the tainted glass and walked toward her, smile smooth, eyes sharp. "You must be exhausted," Marissa said, offering the flute. "You've earned this." Evelyn accepted it with a gracious smile. "Thank you, dear." She raised the glass, pretending to sip while barely wetting her lips. 10 minutes later, when attention drifted and laughter swelled, Evelyn moved quietly toward Helen Brooks, who stood near the bar searching for her purse. Evelyn set the poison glass beside it and picked up a fresh one for herself. Helen reached for the nearest drink without thinking. "Strange aftertaste," she murmured moments later. 5 minutes after that, she collapsed. Now, as paramedics rushed in and Marissa screamed dramatically, Evelyn already knew the truth. This was not panic. This was exposure. And the game had officially begun. Marissa's scream cut through the room like a siren. She dropped to her knees beside her mother, clutching at her shoulders, her sobs loud and dramatic. "Mom, please. Somebody help her." The performance was almost flawless. But Evelyn noticed the details others missed. The way Marissa avoided eye contact with the paramedics, the delay before real tears came. Daniel pushed through the crowd, his face drained of color. "What happened?" he demanded. "I don't know," Marissa cried, gripping his arm. She just collapsed. Evelyn watched her son closely. 39 years of motherhood had trained her eye. Fear was there, yes, but underneath it, calculation flickered. As Helen was lifted onto a stretcher, Evelyn leaned toward the lead paramedic. "Which hospital?" "Mercy General," he replied. "Are you family?" "A close friend," Evelyn said calmly. "I'll follow." Daniel immediately shook his head. "Mom, you should stay here. We'll handle this." How thoughtful, Evelyn thought. "Nonsense," she replied. "Family doesn't abandon family in moments like this." At the hospital, the waiting room buzzed with muted urgency. Marissa paced in tight circles, heels clicking against linoleum, repeating the same phrases. "This is awful. I don't understand how this happened." Daniel sat rigid, scrolling through his phone without really reading anything. Evelyn stayed close enough to hear the medical staff whisper. "Acute poisoning," a doctor said quietly to a nurse. "Likely plant-based alkaloids." Evelyn felt a cold calm settle in her chest. Someone had researched this carefully. When Marissa spoke again, Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her arm. "It's fortunate she didn't drink much," Evelyn said lightly. "Just a few sips." Marissa froze for half a second. "The champagne?" she asked too quickly. "Oh, probably nothing." Evelyn waved it off. "Just an old woman's imagination." But Marissa's hands trembled as she reached for a cup of coffee, and Daniel watched them both with sudden, hawk-like focus. 3 hours later, a doctor announced Helen was stable but would remain overnight. Relief washed over the room, some of it genuine, some rehearsed. In the parking lot, Daniel walked Evelyn to her car. "Maybe you should stay with us tonight," he suggested. "After everything, I'd feel better." Evelyn smiled politely. "That's kind, but I'll be fine. My security system is better than most hotels." As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Daniel and Marissa stood close together, whispering urgently, their hands moving sharply. Back home, Evelyn poured herself a fresh glass of champagne and sat alone in her study. The room still smelled faintly of old books and cedar, her late husband's scent. "All right," she murmured. "Let's see what you planned." Sleep never came. By dawn, legal pads covered her table. The numbers told a brutal story. Daniel's architecture firm was hemorrhaging money. Marissa's fashion boutique barely broke even. Their mortgage alone was crushing, yet they lived lavishly. Luxury cars, expensive vacations, private school tuition for their 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Evelyn traced her own generosity in neat columns. Small loans, down payments, tuition checks, nearly $200,000. Over 6 years. Gifts, she had called them. Clearly, they had called them something else. At 7:15 a.m., her phone rang. "Evelyn," Marissa said breathlessly. "I couldn't sleep." "You're feeling okay, right?" "Perfectly," Evelyn replied. "Any news on your mother?" "They think it was medication," Marissa said quickly.
A lie.
Helen had always been meticulous. "That's a relief," Evelyn said gently. "I was afraid it was something from the party." Silence. "Oh, no," Marissa said. "Definitely not." An hour later, Daniel arrived with pastries from Evelyn's favorite bakery. He moved through the kitchen like a man revisiting childhood, touching countertops, opening drawers. "How are you holding up, Mom?" "I've survived worse," Evelyn replied. He hesitated, then leaned forward. "You're 68. Living alone, managing everything, it's a lot." There it was. "I've managed fine," she said. "But what if that had been you?" Daniel pressed. "What if no one found you?" The audacity stunned her. He pulled out his phone. "We found this place, Serenity Grove. Assisted living, medical staff, beautiful grounds." Evelyn studied the smiling faces on the screen. "How thoughtful," she said coolly. "I'll think about it." His relief was immediate and deeply telling. After Daniel left, Evelyn remained seated at the kitchen table long after the pastries had gone cold. The timing of his concern was too precise to be coincidence. They had waited until after the sale of her company, until her assets were liquid and accessible. A tragic decline, carefully documented, would make everything easier. Her phone rang just before noon. "Arthur?" she said when the familiar voice answered. Arthur Wells had been her attorney for nearly 20 years, a man who believed in preparation over reaction. "I need to see you," Evelyn said calmly. "I believe my son and his wife are trying to kill me." There was a pause, then, "Come now." Arthur's office felt like a fortress, dark wood, quiet authority. He listened without interrupting as Evelyn laid out every detail. When she finished, he folded his hands. "Proof is the challenge," he said. "But the larger threat is legal. They'll come for your competency next." Evelyn nodded. "That's why he showed me assisted living." Arthur moved quickly. "First, we document your mental fitness, immediately. Second, we restructure everything." For 2 hours, they built defenses, trusts, medical directives, layered protections no single signature could undo. "And security," Arthur added. "Upgrade it now." That evening, Evelyn met with a firm specializing in high-net-worth protection. By nightfall, cameras ringed her home. Access codes replaced keys, and alerts fed directly to her phone. An envelope from Arthur arrived with her revised will. Daniel's inheritance had been reduced to a modest trust. The bulk of her estate would now fund medical research and women-led startups. Marissa would receive nothing. Evelyn slept for the first time in days. The next morning, her doorbell rang. Helen Brooks stood there, pale but steady. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "I don't take medication. And I remember the champagne tasted bitter." Her eyes hardened. "I saw Marissa near the drinks with a dropper." Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in." They sat across from each other in the study, the truth heavy between them. "I saw her do it," Evelyn said at last. "I switched the glasses." Helen's face drained of color. "My God." Silence followed, raw, necessary. "What will you do?" Helen asked. "Give them what they want," Evelyn replied. "Just not how they expect." After Helen left, Evelyn made 2 calls. The first was to Rebecca Lane, a private investigator she trusted from past corporate work. "I need everything on my son's finances," Evelyn said. "Everything." The second call went to Daniel. "Lunch tomorrow?" she asked pleasantly. "I've been thinking. You might be right about making changes." His excitement barely fit through the phone. At lunch, Evelyn nodded along as he talked about Serenity Grove. "There's a premium suite," he said. "The fee's high, but it secures everything." "I'll need help with paperwork," Evelyn said. "And a power of attorney." Daniel smiled broadly. "Of course." Thursday morning, Rebecca called. "It's bad," she said. "They're drowning. Credit cards, loans, refinanced mortgage. And there's more." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Marissa took out a $1 million life insurance policy on you 6 months ago," Rebecca continued. "Daniel's been paying a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Nolan Pierce." Arthur confirmed it later. Pierce had a reputation for convenient dementia diagnoses. The full picture locked into place. Poison was Plan A, incompetency was Plan B. Friday arrived gray and wet. Daniel and Marissa came at 9 sharp, documents spread across the dining table like a map of conquest. "This is standard," Daniel said, sliding papers forward. Evelyn picked up a pen. "You're right," she said softly. "It's time." She signed Arthur's forged documents while they entered data into their laptop, smiling. Then the doorbell rang. Detective Ruiz stood there. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "we need to talk about a poisoning." Marissa's face went white. "That was my mother," she stammered. "Medication error." Detective Ruiz shook her head. "Toxicology shows oleander extract. We also tested the champagne." Daniel turned slowly. "Marissa?" she shrieked denial. Evelyn spoke evenly. "I saw you. I switched the glasses." The detective produced another file. "And the insurance policy." Marissa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Daniel's silence was louder than any confession. "You knew," Evelyn said, "about everything else." After Marissa was led away, Daniel whispered, "She said it was just to scare you." Evelyn shook her head. "Those papers you signed give you control of $10. His face crumpled. "You ruined my life." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "You ruined your own." 3 months later, Marissa was sentenced. Daniel received 5 years. Evelyn's fortune was safe, but more importantly, her dignity was intact. They had mistaken age for weakness. It had been her greatest weapon. In the weeks that followed the arrests, Evelyn Carter moved through her days with deliberate calm. The townhouse felt quieter, safer, yet heavier with memory. News traveled fast in her social circle, but she ignored the whispers. She focused instead on structure, appointments with her psychiatrist, meetings with Arthur, check-ins with security. Each document signed felt like reclaiming territory. One afternoon, Lily called from school. "Grandma," she said softly, "are my mom and dad coming home?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "Your mother made choices," she replied gently. "Your father made others. None of this is your fault." Lily cried, and Evelyn listened, letting the silence do its work. After the call, Evelyn stared at the rose garden outside her window, remembering her husband's hands in the soil. "You would have hated this," she murmured. But she also knew he would have understood. Survival sometimes required steel beneath grace. Helen became a steady presence. They met for coffee every Tuesday, two women bound by betrayal rather than blood. "I keep replaying it," Helen admitted once. The smile. The glass. Evelyn nodded. "That's how danger looks when it knows you trust it." Helen's recovery was slow but steady. She filed her own statements, her voice unwavering. Meanwhile, Rebecca's investigation wrapped up, leaving no loose ends. Arthur finalized the trusts, adding contingencies that redirected funds to charities if any beneficiary challenged her will. "It's airtight," he said with satisfaction. Evelyn thanked him, then surprised herself by laughing. It felt strange, alight. For the first time in months, she felt ahead of events rather than chased by them. At home, she reorganized the study, donating old files, keeping only what mattered. Control, she realized, wasn't about hoarding power. It was about choosing where it went. Daniel wrote from prison. The first letter was angry, then pleading, then quiet. Evelyn read each once and placed them in a drawer. She did not reply. Silence was not cruelty. It was boundary. When Lily came to stay on weekends, Evelyn made pancakes and helped with homework, refusing to poison the child with adult truths. "You're safe here," she said often. Lily believed her. One evening, Lily asked, "Are you scared, Grandma?" Evelyn considered the question. "I was," she said honestly. "But fear doesn't get to decide my life anymore." The child smiled and went back to drawing. Later, Evelyn reviewed her calendar. Board meetings for the foundations she now chaired, a lecture invitation at a university, a gala for women in technology. She accepted them all. Visibility, she knew, was protection too. The trial concluded quietly. No spectacle. No apology. Marissa's sentence stood firm. Daniel's plea deal closed the book. Reporters called. Evelyn declined interviews. She preferred results to headlines. With Arthur's help, she funded a scholarship for women returning to tech after caregiving gaps. She endowed a research grant on plant toxins, naming it after Helen. "You don't have to," Helen protested. Evelyn smiled. "I want to." On a gray afternoon, Evelyn visited the cemetery where her husband rested. "I kept us safe," she told the stone. Wind moved through the trees, steady and sure. Back home, she hosted a small dinner, friends who knew the truth, who spoke plainly, who didn't need theater. Laughter returned, unforced this time. At 68, Evelyn understood the final lesson. Age had not made her invisible, it had made her underestimated. That mistake saved her life. She updated her routines, strengthened her alliances, and trusted her instincts, without apology. When people asked how she stayed so composed, she answered simply, "I pay attention." The townhouse glowed again in the evenings, warm with purpose. Money sat where it belonged, working, guarded, intentional. Love did too. And when Evelyn raised a glass now, it was always from a fresh bottle, poured by her own hand. She drank to clarity, to boundaries, and to the quiet power of seeing danger before it announced itself. Months passed, and with them came a new rhythm to Evelyn Carter's life. Mornings began with quiet walks along the lake, afternoons with meetings that challenged rather than drained her. She no longer felt the need to explain herself to anyone. The city, once noisy with reminders of what had happened, softened into background. At a luncheon for the scholarship recipients, a young woman approached her nervously.
"You're the reason I went back to school," she said.
Evelyn smiled, surprised by the tightness in her chest. "No," she replied gently. "You're the reason." On her way home, she realized something had shifted. The story was no longer about survival. It was about continuation. Helen joined her one evening for dinner. They cooked together, moving easily around the kitchen like old friends. "Do you ever regret it?" Helen asked suddenly. "Switching the glasses?" Evelyn paused. "I regret that it was necessary," she said. "Not that I acted." Helen nodded. "People think restraint is weakness." Evelyn laughed softly. "Restraint is strategy." They ate in companionable silence. Afterward, Helen squeezed her hand. "You saved my life too." Evelyn shook her head. "We saved each other." When the door closed behind Helen, Evelyn stood alone for a moment, absorbing the quiet victory of honesty. Lily's visits became more frequent. Evelyn attended school plays, science fairs, parent-teacher meetings. Some parents whispered. Others smiled. None mattered. One night, Lily asked, "Will you always be here?" Evelyn knelt to meet her eyes.
"As long as I'm breathing," she said.
The child hugged her tightly. Later, Evelyn updated her estate plans again, not out of fear, but foresight. Guardianship documents, educational trusts, clear instructions. Chaos thrived in vagueness. She refused to leave any behind. Arthur retired that winter. At his farewell dinner, he raised a glass. "To the most prepared client I ever had," he said. Evelyn chuckled. "You taught me well." She took on a new legal advisor, younger, sharp, respectful. Systems were reviewed, redundancies built. Nothing relied on a single point of failure. When friends teased her about being cautious, she shrugged. "Caution keeps doors open," she said. "Recklessness closes them forever." An invitation arrived from a national conference on aging and autonomy. They wanted her to speak. Evelyn considered declining, then accepted. On stage, she spoke plainly. "We confuse age with decline," she said. "But age is perspective, and perspective saves lives." The applause was long and genuine. Afterward, strangers thanked her. She returned home lighter, resolved. On the anniversary of the party, Evelyn hosted a small gathering. No champagne tower, no hired staff. Just good food, honest conversation, and people she trusted. She noticed how easily laughter came now, how her shoulders no longer tensed at footsteps behind her. Safety, she realized, was not the absence of threat. It was the presence of preparation and truth. Evelyn Carter closed that chapter without bitterness. She did not forgive easily, but she released what no longer served her. At 68, she stood firmly in her life, alert, capable, unashamed. They had mistaken her calm for frailty, her patience for weakness. They were wrong. And, because of that mistake, she was still standing, clear-eyed, undefeated, and entirely her own.